Hi, everyone. If you've just come in, thank you for being here. Welcome. We're going to get started in about 3 or 4 minutes. So get comfortable. We're glad you're here. Hi again, everyone. So we're at our official start time of 3:30. I think we're still having people filter in, so we're just going to wait a couple more minutes and then we will officially get started. Okay, this is great. We still have some folks arriving, so we'll just wait another couple minutes and then we will get going. All right, this group just keeps on growing. Okay, this is very exciting. Can I get a message from the city team? Vin, are we okay starting? We're at 3 minutes after.
Why don't we give folks maybe 2 more minutes?
2 more minutes, okay.
Sometimes I'm running a little behind and yeah, that might be good.
I feel like starting a virtual meeting is a bit like knowing when to take the popcorn off the stove. You don't want to wait too long, but you also don't want to stop it too early. So
yeah, I think that usually the popcorn, if you set it for 3 minutes, maybe it undercooks a little, 4 minutes and burns. So yeah, sure, let's start. Thanks, Mark.
yeah, I will admit I usually burn the popcorn, so maybe I usually wait too long. Oh, okay. 30 seconds. We're gonna wait 30 seconds.
I do see that we still have folks entering.
This is when you really want to be able to like turn to the person you're sitting next to and like have a conversation while you're waiting, but it's a little bit awkward in a virtual environment. Okay, I think we should get going. Well, everybody, welcome. This is so exciting. I feel like I can feel the virtual energy in the virtual room. So thank you all for being here today. My name is Marty Frank. I am your facilitator. As you probably know, this is a public meeting, and hopefully Zoom gave you the message that we are recording. So I'd like to start by asking you all, are you ready to do some big thinking? Because we are here to kick off a policymaking process that will guide us in managing some of the most important buildings in our communities over the next 28 years. Let me say it again, 28 years. That is how far ahead we are looking. The decisions that we make are going to shape the places where the next generation of Portlanders will live and work. So today is one starting point, but it is not the only starting point. We're going to begin our agenda with some critical context, our foundation, so to speak. We're going to hear about the work that has preceded today. We will spend some time in small groups for discussion, and we will learn about the policy toolbox that we can use to address the twin challenges that we face, right? Making our buildings both climate ready and healthy places to live and work. And then finally, we'll talk about what comes next. So before we get started, I'd like to go through just a couple of standard pre-meeting reminders. I'm going to guess that everybody is overly familiar with these at this point, but I'd like to ask you to please stay on mute until we get into our small group discussions. I'd also like to suggest that we all put ourselves on do not disturb on our phones and our other devices. And if you're having any technical issues, please use the chat to message Wing Gabrowski, and you should see his name in the drop-down menu when you go into the chat. So without further ado, and to officially open this meeting, I'd like to call up Commissioner Carmen Rubio. Welcome, Commissioner.
Thank you, Marty, and hello and welcome again, everyone. I'm Commissioner Carmen Rubio, and it's an honor to be with you and talk about this very important initiative on this rainy Monday afternoon as we talk about our building our city's climate resiliency. There's no mistaking it. The climate crisis is here today, and it is already impacting Portlanders who are on the front lines of ice storms, extreme heat waves, high housing costs, loss of income, the ongoing pandemic, and more. Data and people's lived experiences show us again and again that Black, Indigenous, and people of color are disproportionately bearing the brunt of these burdens. We've recognized in our climate emergency declaration that not everyone is affected the same by the impacts of climate change, and that our approaches to solutions must take that into account. And that's why I'm so excited to support the Build Shift partnership between Black, Indigenous, people of color community members in Portland and the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability, for which I serve as commissioner in charge. We have a vision where local government, business, community members, tenants, and climate advocates collaborate to design a policy that improves the quality of our building stock, advances racial equity, delivers measurable benefits to Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities, and lowers our collective carbon footprint. We've got our work cut out for us. The consumption of methane gas and electricity in our homes and buildings is responsible for 40% of the city's greenhouse gas emissions. Buildings are right up there with transportation as the top two sectors with the largest combined emissions in Portland. And thanks to the organizing work of Portland's communities of color in 2018, the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund now invests directly in climate resilience and energy savings. My city council colleagues and I recently approved deploying PSEF dollars to purchase and install thousands of life-saving cooling units before summer 2022 to help protect the most vulnerable among us from the next deadly heat waves. But in order to stop the escalating pace of climate change, We need to do more, and we especially need to focus on supporting renters who often have no control over the energy use or cooling capacity of their living space. When Portland City Council declared a climate emergency in 2020, we explicitly committed ourselves to ensuring that any policy efforts to decarbonize the building sector will prioritize leadership from frontline communities. And we also emphasized improved comfort, safety, and utility savings for renters, as well as protections for low-income tenants that help reduce displacement and promote community stability. And that's where Build Shift comes in. This group of Black, Indigenous, and people of color community advocates has been working hand in hand with BPS to identify what priorities and goals are essential to center as we start thinking about policy changes regarding buildings at the city level. And I've been very impressed with Build Shift's collective thoughtfulness. In particular, the key results identified as HEART standards that will guide our work. The acronym HEART represents healthy living spaces for all, equitable access to energy, anti-displacement strategies, resilience to increasingly extreme and unpredictable weather, and temperature controls that keep everyone safe in disasters. We also need Portland's largest commercial and multifamily buildings, which emit more than half of the greenhouse gases from the built environment, to join us in doing more to help achieve our climate goals. And some of you may be wondering, won't this add cost to Portland's business community at a particularly bad time? We get this. We understand costs will be a primary concern for building owners, and that's why we intend to design a policy together with this in mind. BPS staff will get into the details in a few minutes, but I will tell you that they are deeply committed to bringing a concept forward that is designed to allow buildings to choose the most cost-effective pathways to meet the targets, a concept that is designed to phase in over a very long period of time, allowing for long-range planning. I also want to be clear, as someone who's formerly been on the other end of these planning processes from the nonprofit perspective, that the city intends to authentically collaborate with the private and nonprofit sectors to find and expand resources, like the Energy Trust of Oregon, to help offset costs of policy compliance. We're also exploring the use of federal infrastructure dollars and state programs. And the Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund may also be an option for providing resources to community-led projects that upgrade rental apartments to meet new standards. Above all, the city is committed to seeking out and expanding resources creatively, but we can't do this alone. We will be asking building owners to do their part alongside us, and we can do this together. I look forward to continuing to support and honor the work of Build Shift as we invite all the stakeholders to co-create a comprehensive, effective, just, and fair ordinance together. And as always, my office is open to connecting more with you on this. And my Chief of Staff, Jillian Shoney, and Policy Staff, Mona Schwartz, will leave their information in the chat for your convenience. Next, you'll hear much more detail about what this will look like from the capable staff at BPS. And again, thank you all for honoring us with your time and presence here today. And thank you to the leaders who are setting the stage for this life-saving work. Now I will turn things over to Vin Mason at BPS.
Thank you, Commissioner. We much appreciate your dedication to this work. So my name again is Vin Mason. I'm a Senior Climate Policy Advisor for the City of Portland Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Before I get started, I'd like to share a little background on who I am. I've met many of you previously, many of you in person previously. For some, this is our first time meeting, and hopefully I'll see you all in person sooner than later. So let's see, I'll start with I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm mixed race, Asian and white. My ethnic background is Vietnamese and Virginian. Since 2007, I've worked for the City of Portland on climate action planning and advancing racial equity. I moved to Portland 27 years ago and watched our weather patterns change. More recently, I think we all have a sense for how climate change will impact our lives and the lives of our children and grandchildren. With last summer's heat dome, winter power outages, and wildfires that choked our air with smoke for weeks, but thankfully did not burn our city down. It could be worse. Half of my family lives in Vietnam, where ancient cities are being swept away by extreme flooding, and the heat is now unbearable without access to cooling. Throughout the world, those who are living on the front lines of climate change contribute the least carbon emissions to our atmosphere. And in Portland, our Black and Brown communities have had the least amount of voice in policy decision-making to prepare for climate emergencies and reduce greenhouse gas emissions until now. So with this introduction, I will share a presentation on the upcoming development of climate and health standards for existing buildings. I'll start screen sharing. Let's move my windows around here, see everything. All right. Settings. How is that looking? Wing? Marty, give me a thumbs up.
That looks pretty good.
Okay.
We see your presentation, but not your notes.
Awesome. All right, I still have the chat open. I'm just going to move the chat out of the way so I can see the full screen here. Move our faces out of the way. All right. Okay, so I'll be sharing some background here, and Andrea Jacob, my manager at BPS, will share some next steps. Okay, so we'll start with kind of the landscape of how we're to the point we are today. So some background on climate change and the risks, the critical role that buildings play, and how this intersects with climate justice. Then we'll have some breakout groups. The breakout groups will be about values. So today it's really a chance to get to know some of the stakeholders in the room, but there'll be some working groups that Andrea will describe later, where we'll have a lot more robust discussion about key decisions. We'll also, after the breakout groups, share the policy concept that we have right now to improve buildings and how to get involved in those working groups or through broader public participation. So I think some of you have taken note that today it happens to be that the International Panel on Climate Change released their 6th assessment report. It's grim, I'll say that. The summary for policymakers is 3,675 pages long. So I have not reviewed it all yet, but I did review the beginning of that summary. They need an executive summary for that summary, by the way. But what it says is that more frequent and intense human-induced climate extremes are notable throughout the entire world now. And the science is behind that. It also points to that our most vulnerable populations are disproportionately affected, as I noted earlier. And I think the other key message here, though, that is new to me is that irreversible impacts to natural and human systems are pushed beyond their ability to adapt. So what that means to me is that we can't simply just focus on resilience. We have to reduce our carbon emissions, and other cities in the rest of the world have similar goals to Portland to be 100% renewable by 2050. We need to act now to avoid climate catastrophe. Thinking more Portland-centric for a minute, some of you all might know the Oregon Climate Change Research Institute out of Oregon State. There's over 100 scientists from around our state that are part of this research institute, and they contribute to the International Panel on Climate Change and the information that they share and collect from the entire world. And what they tell us at OCRI in town is that we should plan for heavier winter storms. No surprise today, right? Increasing wildfire frequency and size. So it wasn't just what we saw in 2019 that approached Portland. There's going to be more of that in our future. We were seeing this in California already. They project that we'll have more hot days, some more summer days above 90 degrees, hotter days, like with how we broke our record of 107 degrees last summer, and the longer duration of heat waves. Thinking of that, the heat dome that happened. Here's a record of daily maximum temperatures in Portland as far back as we have these records, to 1938. And what it's showing here is that the previous record was 107 degrees. On June 26th, we broke that at 108 degrees at the airport. And then on June 27th, we reached 112 degrees. On June 28th, we reached 116 degrees. That's 9 degrees higher than we'd ever had at the airport. So this is from Multnomah County and part of the report. And I encourage you all to look at their report on the heat wave. We've been looking at this for a while for climate change preparation at the city of Portland. This is a map, a heat map, as it turns out, of urban heat island effect. It's modeled by Dr. Vivek Chandas at PSU, and we mapped it here. And what it's showing is that there are neighborhoods that are much more susceptible to heat and heat waves than some of the other neighborhoods. And this makes sense, right? So where there's lots of trees and green infrastructure, like the example here that I've snipped out of Goose Hollow in the Southwest Hills, that's the intersection of the 405 and the 26. And it's covered in green space and trees. On the map here, that's the blue area. And so those are the areas that stay cooler when we have heat waves. On the right, the picture I'm showing here is the 205 out near Powell Boulevard. This is actually one of the city's facilities, covered in pavement in that area. It's not just the city, there's a lot of pavement out there. Those are areas that get much hotter. So what Dr. Chandas has modeled for the last 10, 15 years is that there's a 20-degree difference in summertime at the daily maximum temperatures across our city. During that last heat dome, although the airport might have been at 116 degrees, when we get out to Lentz in the afternoon, he measured 122 degrees. During that heat wave, it could have gone higher, it just happened to be when he was there. So that's something that we really need to consider is the variation of temperature across our city and why is that variation there? Here's a trend of carbon emissions. So thinking about what's causing climate change. And one thing to note about this trend, and I think many of you have been involved in this work in Portland for a long time, is we were celebrating like, wow, from 2000, when we had our local global warming action plan to 2012, it just seemed like we were on track and we kept on going down in emissions. And I think we were celebrating that. We were celebrated internationally for that. But since 2012, the last decade, our emissions have plateaued. They're going not in the direction we need them to be. Our goal for 2030 is to cut our emissions in half compared to 1990 levels. We're far from that goal. Our goal for 2050 is to bring our emissions to zero. If we look at the building sector for a second, in that last decade, our building emissions from the commercial and residential sectors have actually gone up by 8%. So they're definitely going in the wrong direction. If we combine our commercial and residential sectors together, 24 and 18% respectively, that's 42% of our whole city's carbon emissions. And this is the county, but we do our emissions inventory at the county, but still, we just crossed this threshold for the first time I've worked at the Bureau where the building emissions exceed the transportation emissions. And that's 2019. Imagine 2020, what that will look like when we started working at home and the streets went quiet during the pandemic. Here's an example of the type of buildings that we want to see in the future. So some of you are familiar with this, the June Key Delta Community Center. Amazing project. This, you might not know, because this is fairly recent information, that June Key, over at right across from Peninsula Park in Albina and Ainsworth, that is Portland's first net zero commercial building, meaning that it consumes less energy than it produces over the course of a year. It's also a community center led by Black women for our communities. many gatherings and good things have happened in this place. So it's not just a building. And that brings me to these intersections then of climate action and advancing racial equity. This is the People's Climate March in 2018. And there was a real turning point that I saw there. I've gone to many, this is on Earth Day. I've been to many Earth Day marches, but this is the first one where community-based organizations that are representing people of color and looking out for them led this march. And that's where I see is where our city shifted to climate justice and the realization that we can't continue to heat and power our buildings with fossil fuels. And it starts with fossil fuel extraction and then the transfer of those fossil fuels and pipelines all the way to us and the combustion in our power plants, as well as the combustion within our homes. So climate justice, climate change is a social justice issue. And at our bureau, we've been on a, I'd say at least a decade path of becoming an anti-racist organization. And part of that journey was with our climate action planning. In 2015, our last climate action plan, we had an equity working group that many of you here helped contribute to. It was towards the end of the process where we had 171 actions that were reviewed and looked at them through an equity lens. It was groundbreaking at that time. But one thing I remember hearing in the recap of that work is that the Black and Brown communities that were consulted in this work really wanted to be involved from the beginning of the process, not midway or at the end. So I was looking for an opportunity to do that. How can we have a project that really focuses on collaboration and deferring to our Black and Brown communities? This is the spectrum of community engagement. Movement Strategy Center, who was out of Oakland, but now called Climate Innovation, was a consultant both to the city during this time period in 2018, but also to community groups that were rising as climate justice leaders. And they developed this spectrum working with the city of Portland and advising us that let's move out of this consultative phase that we've been in, forming side groups to look at equity and really center the work. Another consultant in this work was Race Forward. We're part of a national effort called the Zero Cities Project. And Race Forward developed this tool for that project. They looked at the intersections, like how do we stop displacement? There's many ways. There's many ways to try to untangle that problem. But one of them is energy cost burden. The percent that our residents pay out of their income on their utility bills, their energy utility bills. So if we can reduce their utility bills, especially that winter heating bill, then that's one of the ways that we can prevent displacement. If we can prevent displacement, that's also a way to prevent community gentrification. Another pathway is to increase economic prosperity. Who gets the jobs? Portland Clean Energy and Community Benefits Fund that Commissioner Rubio mentioned earlier is a great example of that. Some other aspects that intersect are substandard housing and health risks, particularly for rental housing, where the tenants don't pay their utility bills, so they have very little incentive to make improvements to their housing. And then, or they do pay their utility bills, but they don't own it, versus the landlords who usually don't pay the utility bills and then don't have as much of an incentive to invest. Another intersection that I mentioned is the urban heat island effects. We put all this together, there's community engagement. And the way we saw this in Portland was, let's try community-led engagement to get to that intersection of how do we reduce carbon emissions at the same time advance racial equity. So under the leadership of the Coalition of Communities of Color and Verde, there was a team that was formed called we call them Build Shift now. I'll introduce that a little bit later. But Build Shift, mix of community members and nonprofit organizations, started to host community forums that they led and the city was a partner in. the first one in December 2019. And most of 2020, we were responsive to community needs around the pandemic, the racial justice protests, and community safety and housing. But we picked it back up, especially after the wildfires, and came back to let's go deeper into energy burden. Let's understand the energy cost burden issues that people are living through, their lived experience, and then reconvene in July of this last summer and speak about what's the policy that's needed when we think about building decarbonization. So key findings from those meetings. One is that energy burden for our participants ranged from 1.8 to 45%. So some folks, when we met in March of last year, had just received their utility bill, and it's 45% of their income. So you can see how there's that connection to where somebody might be like, I can no longer afford to live where I'm at, and thus result in displacement. Many folks, although there are lots of utility programs and resources through the county for energy bill assistance, were not aware of them or had struggles in trying to engage with that. We also heard that a lot of folks have family and social network obligations. It's not just the one person who's paying that bill, but they're also responsible for their parents or their children. The other thing that we heard, I think is key here, is that there's discomfort with landlord interaction. A lot of the folks we engaged with were in rental housing that's substandard, and there was fear of retaliation if they were to say, wow, you know, my door doesn't close all the way and it's leaking energy, but it's also a safety issue, but fear of bringing it up because that might be one more reason to raise rent or worse, to evict. So out of that kind of work, we also heard about policy priorities, especially the policy convenings last summer. And what we heard is that there needs to be minimum standards and upgrades for rentals. That will help lower utility bills. When that happens, though, we also want to ensure that the costs don't pass through to the renters to stabilize rent. To do that, there needs to be incentives to invest in clean energy and financing so that landlords don't feel like there's no place for them to recover their costs. And there needs to be more energy assistance to low-income individuals and families, or at least better pathways to know that that energy assistance exists and to be able to access it. Then lastly here, but also very important, is that tenants should have the right to know energy information for renting decisions before they rent. And we do this for commercial buildings right now, and their tenants, it's all public disclosure. It's available for commercial tenants, but not for rental housing. Okay, so with that, I'd like to introduce the Build Shift Building Community Shifting Power team. So I want to thank Taryn Evans, who is here tonight, who leads the work for the Coalition of Communities of Color and who coined the term for our community team. So Build Shift, we seek to build community across the Portland metro area, share knowledge and community wisdom, and shift political power to Black and Brown folks through leadership development and participatory policymaking. Besides the Coalition of Communities of Color, I mentioned we have a lot of individual community members. We also have Apano, Community Energy Project, Leaders Become Legends, that are great nonprofits in town if you haven't heard of them. And then another key anchor partner is Verde. And so rather than speak for Verde, we have a wonderful video to share, but also Candace Avalos is here, who is their executive director. And so I will turn it over to Candace and stop screen sharing a minute while Wing loads up a video for us to watch about an amazing project they have.
All right, thank you, Vin. Hi all, Candace Avalos here, she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director at Verde. So I'll share a little bit about Verde's background and how we got into Build Shift, and then lead into talking about our Deckless Heat Pump program, which is the video that we're going to show. So Verde serves communities by building environmental wealth through social enterprise, outreach, and advocacy. We were born in Northeast Portland's Cully neighborhood, a neighborhood with more than its share of poverty and less than its share of environmental assets. We started as an environmental economy program for Hacienda CDC's residents, an affordable housing provider based here in Cully. And we later spun off into our own independent nonprofit, getting our 501c3 status in October of 2005. Verde is of and by low-income communities, and we bring new environmental investments to Portland's neighborhoods, involve community members in the planning of those investments and building those investments, and we ensure that low-income people and people of color are directly benefiting. Build Shift started as the Zero Cities project, in which Verde took what could have been a plan within a plan and helped turn it into a capacity and power building project that you see today in partnership with BPS. Verde has taken more of a backseat through the evolution of this project to lift up the leadership of community members and the Coalition of Communities of Color. It's an example of Verde's theory of change in action, which is that we believe in building environmental wealth as an anti-poverty strategy. And this means that poverty and the environment are directly connected. Therefore, investment in environmental assets is a strategy to fight poverty. Our work is at the intersection of racial, environmental, and economic justice, and we believe that it is at the heart of all issues of livability, security, and wealth. One of the concerns that comes up around this work is whether it's possible to fund and to bring to scale, and Verde's social enterprise, Verde Builds, answers that question with a solid yes. Our work shows that we can make the needed changes in community by following the lead of the community. Our ductless heat pump program, or DHP program, in partnership with the Energy Trust of Oregon and the Portland Clean Energy Fund, is taking big steps in our community to offer low-income homeowners more efficient ways to heat and cool their homes. And we continue to scale this program up in partnership with minority and women-owned contractors, which is a big part of our goal at Verde Builds. So with that, we're going to show you a little video to talk more about our program.
Tuve un accidente en enero del 2019 y la estaba pasando muy mal. Estaba cerrando la puerta de un tráiler y se fue atrás y me agarró contra una barda y la talló. Sufrí bastante y un año me aventé casi sin trabajar. Mi casa es una de las casas de las antiguas, hecha en el 1928 creo. Y no tenía insulación y estaba muy fría. Es muy dificultoso porque en tiempo del invierno, como esta casa que tiene el alambrado eléctrico, no levanta muchos voltios. Estaban muy altos, no tenían muchos ingresos. Mi hija me puso en contacto con Verde y de ahí fue de la manera que me hicieron la proposición, vinieron a ver la casa para ver si calificaba para el proyecto.
Verde is an environmental justice organization that works predominantly in the Cully neighborhood, but also our work spans Portland and Oregon as a whole. Our mission is to build environmental wealth through social enterprise, outreach, and advocacy. Verde Builds created the ductless heat pump activator program in 2019.
Verde Builds, the Energy Trust of Oregon, and the Portland Clean Energy Fund have partnered together to make heating and cooling more accessible for people in low-income minority neighborhoods. It costs anywhere from $4,000 to $5,000 to install one of these systems. We're installing the systems at a significantly low cost or sometimes free.
Me lo instalaron y cambió mi vida.
Tonight, scorching temperatures hotter than ever recorded in parts of the Pacific Northwest, including Portland, Oregon.
El verano ha sido muy fuerte este año y gracias a la unidad que cuando hace calor te refresca y cuando hace frío te calienta. Mucha felicidad poder traerlos a mis nietos, a mis hijos aquí y que no tengan problemas a andar afuera o estar adentro y con el aire puesto y bien cómodos.
I think this program is really important because it's a game changer for a lot of low-income families. Those are the people that would most likely have a system that consumes a lot of electricity. A ductless heat pump system is a very efficient unit, and so ends up saving people about 40% on their energy bill. A few $100 on the energy bill a month, that's for food, that's for shelter, that's what they need.
Esta casa, de la manera que podría describirla, es casi como una reliquia, algo valioso. Quizás personas como yo que saben apreciar las cosas no quieres deshacerte de ellas porque sufriste, sudaste para hacerte de ellas y no es por el valor económico quizás, sino algo que ya como ahorita lo hiciste poco a poco. Me tocó un momento desagradable, pero gracias al programa de Verde y a la unidad esta, me levanté moralmente y Dios me puso en el camino otra vez y estoy contento.
Thanks so much. And Vin, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you, Candace, and thank you for the work of Verde on this program. This program focuses on single-family residential homes. However, the ductless heat pump solution is something that we can also use to reduce carbon emissions and provide cooling for multifamily residential, which is part of our focus here today, commercial multifamily. Okay, so next up, I will start sharing screen again. Where did I leave off? Okay, great. Everybody see that okay? Let me know if not. You should see a Wordle right now. Okay, so we will get to the policy details here soon on the concept that we've developed and that we want to refine and have broader stakeholder engagement. But before we get there, I wanted to share an exercise of looking at values, personal values. And this is something that I learned along the way through community-led engagement by the Coalition of Communities of Color in Verde in the Build Shift team. And it's really to ground ourselves in what our values are before we go into making key decisions that impact our communities. Because reducing carbon emissions is about people as much as it being about buildings. So Candace mentioned environmental justice. So we can see environmental justice in here. And a lot broader than that, a lot of shared values, family, community, love. I'm just reading some of them: safety, honesty, a lot of shared values between many folks here. And so that's what we wanted to take a minute to do, is to have some breakout groups. We're just going to ask a couple quick and easy questions around values. But it's also an opportunity really to kind of get to know the wide variety of stakeholders we brought to the table. So before we go there, I just want to share a few of our ground rules of the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. So the first one: listen to understand, not respond. So I think we all kind of know that one, right? Let's not just jump right in and make our point. There'll be times to make points in the working groups, for instance, but also in the public comment period. But right now, like, really try to understand the other folks in the room. The next one: wait. Why am I talking? I am an extroverted person, I admit. And sometimes I'm an outward processor, let's say, and I need to check myself and ask myself, why am I talking? Who else hasn't spoken? Another one: assume good intentions, but attend to impact. So if there's an ouch moment within there, rather than like defend, like, oh, I didn't mean it that way, my intention was to do this, but instead ask someone like, well, let me understand why that hurt. Next, be willing to make mistakes and be forgiving to those who do. That's how we learn. If we don't make mistakes, we're not going to learn. I think that goes back to the honesty value. If we can be authentic and honest in the space, we probably will make mistakes no matter who we are. So let's forgive each other when that happens and try to understand where each other coming from. Allow for and appreciate disagreement of opinion, ideas, methods respectfully. Let's honor diversity in our spaces. Personal stories stay, lessons can be learned, or as I say, lessons can go. So we would ask to make it a safer space to be honest and authentic, not to say, well, Candace said this. That's what she said, and that was offensive. Like when you go back to the office tomorrow, or well, I guess we're not all going back to offices quite yet, but for those who do, or you're just back in virtual meetings again with your colleagues. Share the lesson instead of naming someone. And then lastly, we have a number 7 here. It's called fill in the blank. And so what I'd like to say is make some space for all to be heard. We'll have 20 minutes, 2 questions. That's enough time, I think, where everybody can be heard. So another acronym, I guess not an acronym, but going back up to number 2, the wait, why am I talking? There's also why am I not talking? And so I would ask, if you're here, come off of video. I'm sorry, come off of mute, turn on your video and participate, please. We need to hear from everyone and we need to hear from each other. All right, with that, we'll get into our small group breakouts for the next 20 minutes. There will be a reminder when it's wrapping up. There should be plenty of time. You don't have to cover both questions. If you're really deep on the first one, go for it. But there will be a reminder that when we're coming back in. When the reminder happens, maybe just look around the room and see, like, did anybody else not speak here? And make some space, take a pause. So 2 easy questions I mentioned. What values guide your personal work? Let's start that. Well, actually, let's start with introductions, names, pronouns, affiliations or affiliation if you have one. Yeah, and then what values guide your personal work? Then what values should guide our collective work together, entering into stakeholder working groups and into other stakeholder engagement as well. And at the end, we'll come back together and we'll just do a quick report out, a reflection in the chat if you'd like, and I could read those off. We have the chat generally disabled, but you can put stuff into the chat that the hosts are able to see. All right, so with that, I will stop sharing and say, Wing, take it away. Break us up.
Almost there, Vin. Give me just one more second.
Oh, great time for a little break. All right, I'm gonna drink of water.
Yeah, and everyone, in the chat, you'll find kind of the suggested agenda for our small group. So introductions, and then those 2 questions that we will all be discussing.
And I'll just say thanks again for y'all being here tonight. Seeing many folks that I have known for many years and folks that are new to me too, that I've just met in the last couple of weeks, and folks I haven't met yet. And I look forward to meeting with you.
All right, we are all set to go.
All right, have a good discussion, y'all.
All right, then it seems like I had to assign you to a room. I couldn't figure out how to not or to remove you. So.
Oh, you did great. Yeah. I'm looking through it right now, Wing, and
yeah,
Dell is there.
And yeah, I'm not sure I got build shift distributed evenly, but
that's okay. I appreciate it.
I did my best. Yeah.
Oh,
I did not group BPS folks together as well.
Oh yeah, you did awesome. I'm looking through it right now. Thank you so much, Wing. Oh, what a great cast of folks that we've reached. I'm really happy. All right, and then yeah.
Should I be in a breakout room or is this a breakout room?
No, you should be. Looks like you're in room 8. Oh, you know, Wayne, can you bring Ezel into breakout room 8?
I can join.
Okay.
Number 8.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Wing, I'm also here in this room. If this is a room, I don't know it. This is Mona.
Here. I didn't know if this was our cue to drop off.
This is the time to join a room, a breakout room.
Oh,
can you help
okay.
out?
It just came through. That's nice.
Mona, I see room 10 for you. Oh, and Nina, you're also room 10. Do you see that option there? Then who else we have? Alma, Susan, Andrew, and Kelly.
Then it looks like they're assigned and just have not accepted the option to join those rooms.
Okay, Nina, do you see that option? I see that Kevin is in room 7. Are you there, Nina? Okay. Susan, how are you doing? Thanks for being here. Can you join the room? Okay, so some folks might have had to step out. I think whoever we have left, Alma, how about you? I think what's happened, Wing, is that the remaining folks probably are not at their computers.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, could you stay on though in case folks need help?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. And then when are we coming back? Is it like 4:31?
Yeah, I set it to end at 19 minutes, which then gives people a 60-second grace period to come back, and we'll alert them as well. So it's total 20 minutes from when I open the room.
Okay. Do you know what time that would be? I saw 4:16, so it'd be 4:36 or so. I'll plan on being back at 4:35.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Great.
It's
Yeah,
I'd say it's gone swimmingly.
Yeah, I think it's gone very well.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Appreciate the help.
Hi, do you see the option to rejoin room 4?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you for doing that.
Awesome. Thanks, Jonna. Good to see you. Hey, Isaiah, and welcome. Are you there?
Hey there, so sorry I'm late.
No worries. Thanks for being here. I knew you're running behind.
Yeah.
They had something else. I appreciate you making the time. So
Yeah.
we're in this small group breakouts for another 10 minutes.
Okay.
It's probably good timing to join because they're probably working on the second question. The questions are, let's see. So introductions, names, pronouns, affiliations. What values guide your personal work? What values should guide our collective work? So it's very just kind of like get grounded in values together, get to know some folks you might not normally know before we go into a broader stakeholder engagement. Don't feel like you need to jump into one right now if you feel weird jumping in the middle. Hi, Amy, welcome. I was just sharing that we're in breakout rooms around just values discussion. And you're welcome to join a breakout room. Wing, who's here, can help you do that. We're about halfway through, and the questions are, what values guide your personal work? What values should guide our collective work? So you could jump in there. There was a round of introductions and names, pronouns, and affiliations too that already happened. But you can just stay here too if you want to just wait for 10 minutes and everybody will be back.
I had to sort of jump in and out, so I don't want to disturb the flow of a group. So I will.
Okay.
Just a second. Thanks.
Isaiah, this is Wing. I'm running support. Did you want to join a group? I can place you.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind hanging out either.
So just hang out.
Yeah, I can just hang out. That's be fine.
Okay, great. Just wanted to make sure.
All right, cool. Thanks.
We're going to start up about 4:36, so 7 minutes now, not long.
Welcome back, everybody. I think we'll just wait a second for everybody to pop back in. I don't know about you all, but in my group, we absolutely could have kept going. Could everybody have taken another 10 or 15 minutes? Yeah. When we were planning this meeting, we were talking about the fact that when you're planning a meeting like this, you always worry about putting too much time for breakout rooms because you worry that people will, sit there and not have anything to say. And then in practice, you could always use more time. Yet, no matter how much time you put on the agenda. Thank you all. Vin, I'll turn it over to you for the report out.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I think especially the more we're online together and we get in personal spaces, like it just, I feel like I'm personally at least craving more of that. So I look forward to when we're actually in person and we can really have these long conversations, maybe around some, city-sponsored food that we can eat together. We'll see. All right. So in the interest of time, we don't have the chat. That's kind of an open, everybody communicate kind of, but you can send a message in the chat and I will look for it over here. And then if you have any reflections to share, I'll go ahead and share out those reflections. I'm not seeing anything come out directly yet. Oh, and there was a question that came to the chat earlier about will there be a recording sent out later? We're not planning to send out a recording to everyone, but if you are interested in recording, why don't you go ahead and email me. And there in the invitation, my email address is in there, but also there's a link to our website. And in the website there, you can email me directly through that. All right, so any reflections, any nuggets that you all want to share from your individual breakout rooms? I hope everybody had a good experience.
And Vin,
hear more this week. Yeah.
If somebody wants to share a reflection, you can share that anonymously, right? So that people can feel free to speak their mind.
Oh yeah. Okay. So because we have the chat disabled for everyone right now, you can just send a message to me. Okay. So our group had great dialogue. Good. Should we do one more before we pick it up? We do need to wrap up pretty soon here. We got about 23 minutes left and still need to introduce the policy concept, right? All right, something I heard that was really impactful was I just don't want people to die. Wow. We chatted about a desire to make sure that vulnerable communities are uplifted and have the resources that they need. Policy that reflects the needs of community while also being aware of unintended consequences, including businesses and community. Be guided by people's real lived experience. Community values coming together to help folks that need it the most. A sense of urgency. All right, thanks. One more. Was impressed at the diversity of perspectives and experience. Great, love that. That's what we have. We hopefully have a really diverse group here. Okay, so I'm going to pick up and start sharing more. And now we're going to get into the weeds of the policy. All right. And then we'll wrap it up with how to get more engaged in our stakeholder process. All right, so. All right, so the concept that we'll be introducing tonight and refining through stakeholder engagement is not new. 6 cities across the nation are implementing what's called building performance standards to reduce carbon emissions, plus Montgomery County in Maryland and whole states of Colorado and Washington. I want to thank our national partners. You can see over to the right here, the Institute for Market Transformation, IMT, that helps track these policies and helps cities learn from one another. They've been very instrumental in one, bringing funding to the Build Shift team to lead community engagement initially to bring us to this point where we're at now with the concept. And also the Institute has been really helpful when we established our commercial energy reporting program. And a similar map like this exists for that, which is now like wildfire. Well, that's maybe a bad term to use tonight, but has gone across the entire United States. And that's probably true too. All right, before I go further in that. Okay, so building performance standards are the, in IMT's words, the most powerful policy tool available to drive improved building performance, specific to carbon reductions especially. And so we have joined a national coalition that they have brought together. It's through the White House Council on Environmental Quality, and that Portland signed on in December. So we're now part of a national coalition. So we're going to see that map expand very rapidly next year, particularly with a lot of funding. The way that they work in a nutshell here is that these are not solutions for tomorrow. Like we heard about the heat response, they're trying to get using Portland Clean Energy Community Benefits Fund to before next summer hits, in case we have another devastating heat wave with mass casualties. That's for like immediate response. So that's the PSEF effort. In this work, we're looking long-term. We're looking to get to that zero emissions by 2050. So we see like, well, everybody starts in a different place. Like June Key, they're actually on the bottom there. They're already there. They're compliant 2050. But the other buildings, how do we get them to 2050 and get on track now, because we are in an emergency now. We're in a climate emergency. So the idea is that it phases in over time. We figure out what those set targets are through administrative rulemaking, but through ordinance development is to set up the structure that it's 10-year increments, 5-year increments, to be determined through stakeholder engagement to get us to that 2050 type of goals. Some other things that make the building performance standards different: they are not prescriptive. So we can apply, it's not one size fits all. It's about reaching a target and having the performance to get there. So there's many pathways. Energy efficiency is one, conserving energy is another, renewable energy is another pathway. There are alternate compliance pathways for those who just would rather do nothing either, that we've seen in other cities. So we'll talk about that. What we hope to see though, and what we're starting to see in these cities that have these standards, are deep retrofits across cities, where it's not just one June Key out there that really led and others are slow to follow, but that's something that can be retrofit across the city. By the way, June Key was an existing car garage that was retrofitted. Yeah, so these are some of the aspects of a building performance standard of why they are really emerging across the country. Since that long-term signal has the flexibility and the need, if we have another 5 heat domes in a row, we'll want to act fast. We can look at costs too and think about like, what is the appropriate cost at different times? We can be looking at, are we in a recession or not? So there's a lot of flexibility in here, but we need to get on target. So in these other cities, and I've added Boulder to this list because they have something very similar in rental energy efficiency standards. What we're seeing is a energy or carbon metric with greenhouse gas emissions or something around energy, like home energy scores, similar to what we have in Portland, is used in Boulder. They also have a prescriptive checklist in Boulder. A lot of these have options for prescriptive checklists. Some folks prefer that rather than just trying to figure out like, what do I do to get to this target? There's prescriptive ways to get there. So there's options. All the cities have equity considerations, but as I mentioned earlier about the equity working group, of kind of let's put all this work through an equity lens and see if we get some ideas. That was the approach taken in other cities, as I understand. What's different in Portland is right from the start, we met with BIPOC communities, knowing that if we meet with Black, Indigenous, people of color first, that all low-income people will benefit from these standards. So here's what ours look like. Pretty different, heavy equity focus. So there's reducing carbon emissions, but also improving health and indoor air quality. Oh, I left off a D there, my mistake. Yeah, there are hazards from making buildings more energy efficient, like mold. There are hazards from intersections with carbon emissions with natural gas stoves. Right now, the code requires ventilation. And so we want to see that ventilation available to all existing buildings, especially renters, low-income renters. We want to prevent displacement of people. I've got to that earlier. So whatever we do to reduce carbon emissions, we have to do it right so that we don't displace folks. We want to build resilience to wildfire smoke. So we're not making choices when those events happen. There's strong east winds and we have heat waves. For folks not to make the choice of, at night, do I try to cool off my home and sleep, and let the smoke in, or do I keep myself closed and not sleep because it's too hot? We also know there's power outages that we've seen in California with wildfire smoke that are vast in scale. But we've also had power outages to extreme weather last Valentine's. How unromantic, to have a power outage happen. Well, actually, maybe that worked out for some folks that have candles and stuff, but to not have heat and power. And we are also looking at, because of the heat dome, setting maximum indoor temperature limits. I listed some other cities there. There's many other cities that have temperature limits for rental housing, specifically of 82 degrees, 78 degrees, 85 degrees. What should that be? That's a key decision point of what is safe for folks, so that we don't have what has been the deadliest heat wave on the West Coast. It's actually one of the deadliest in the world's history, as it's comparable in size to one of the top 10 worldwide heat waves in Chicago in 1995. So, are we going to cover all buildings? Key question. The answer is no. Single family residential, we already have some regulation there on home energy scores. Multifamily residential, we barely do anything. We definitely need to cover multifamily. Commercial, we regulate right now large commercial for the annual energy reporting and disclosure that I mentioned that commercial tenants have access to. So if we were to combine commercial that's in the blue, the purple for multifamily together, that's 2/3 of the Portland building carbon emissions. Remember, the buildings themselves are nearly half. So we put those numbers together and we have about 20% of the emissions from Portland that could be reduced through this policy concept. So where are we going next? So we look at large commercial and multifamily on owner-occupied apartments or condos. There's already some regulation there at 20,000 square feet and larger. So let's start the conversation there. And we see that as a building work group. For multifamily apartments that are rentals, there's not regulation there. But single family, we generally think of 1 or 2 units. So let's maybe think of like more than 3 units, up to maybe something larger. Like 20 units is around 20,000 square feet. But that's something, both of these thresholds, we start a conversation through stakeholder engagement, and then we refine it with y'all, hear your feedback. So we need your help on these working groups. The rentals, actually, when I go to the next one, the rentals have a very wide range of considerations here. At Build Shift, again, thank you, Taryn Evans at Coalition of Communities of Color, who has coined many of our terms, one being the HEART standards, a focus on health, equitable energy, anti-displacement, resilience, and temperature control within rental housing. So that's one area that we'll focus in a tenant working group, all 5 areas. Within the building working group, which is more of a commercial multifamily focus, we'll consider all of them, but definitely look at equitable energy. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my manager, Andrea Jacob, to share more about how to get involved in these working groups. Andrea, are you ready? I know that Andrea's having some internet issues too, so I can step in if she starts sounding like Max Headroom or something.
Please definitely interrupt me. Hi, everyone. Andrea Jacob, she, her pronouns, climate policy and program manager for the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I've had the great pleasure of watching Vin lead this for the last several years. And it's amazing to be at this stage. So at this stage, on the far left of the screen, you see stakeholder engagement launch today, February 28th. That is where we are right now. And we are moving to the right into stakeholder engagement. I think tomorrow is March. So March through June will be a number of inputs into the stakeholder engagement process. So those 2 boxes at the top, the tenant working group and the building working group, Vin has made reference to these. Throughout April and May, these groups will meet every other week, and there'll be 4 meetings each, and we'll have some information about how you can get involved in those. But that's the core, really important part of stakeholder engagement. Underneath, you'll also see there'll be a number of focused meetings with the different stakeholders that we've listed there, because each of these are unique and special and have particular needs and priorities that require a little bit different conversation that will than that which will be happening in the two working groups. And then at some point, we will, the Build Shift group will reconvene to review what we come up with in terms of some, we'll take all this feedback and try to draft some ordinance language. That ordinance will have a public comment period. So if you're not in a working group, that's not the last or only place to make comment and to weigh in. So we plan to get there around summer of this year. And then after that, we'll stop and take stock and see where we are and assess what the timeline might be for any action by City Council. But at this time, we don't have a real firm timeline beyond the public comment draft. That's all I wanted to say there. So to join a working group, your call to action is to email Michelle DePass at portlandoregon.gov. Her email is listed right there. And then we encourage you also to go to our website to sign up for project email updates. Everyone who is here today is automatically on our communications list, and you'll be receiving our follow-up materials. But for anyone else in your organizations or anyone else that might have an interest, the project email update is going to be your best bet. And so that is our web listing there. I think that brings us to the end of the formal presentation.
Yeah, and so one other thing I'll note is for follow-up communication by registering for the event tonight. Yeah, anybody who registers, even if you're here or not tonight, we will be sharing follow-up this week with a draft narrative concept that will then inform the working groups. So we hope that will help you make some decisions about whether or not to join the working group. So share it with your colleagues. Feel free to share it further as well. We do want to have a robust group of folks and a diverse group of folks to help inform both the tenant working group and the building working group, as well as if you see yourself as like, oh, I'm more of like one of those focused meetings categories, you could also participate there. And if you see yourself in the focused meeting category, don't feel like you can't participate in both places. And if you are with a community-based organization, we have at least $1,000 stipend that we would like to deliver for participation within either of the working groups. So please consider that as well. We're looking at 4 2.5-hour meetings that are in April and May per working group, so bi-weekly. So if you want to do both, that would mean your Wednesdays from noon to 2:30 booked for 8 weeks solid. But we are recruiting technical resources into both spaces, including the Energy Trust of Oregon, Northwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, and all of our utilities. So we hope to see you all there in that space as well. So I think that's about it. If you have questions, I'm sure many of you have many questions. We will get there in the working groups. Maybe the working group's not going to work out for you, or the focus meetings. So there's a couple ways to follow up. One, if it's about the working groups, I'd say send that to Michelle. Michelle will help organize that. Again, her email address is in the chat. And then on the website, you can find my email address as well. I'd be happy to follow up. We're spending the month of March really taking some time to help folks understand what it is that we're working on here, because it's big and we know that's going to have a lot of impact. And for some of you that might be challenging, and for some of you are very excited. So we want to hear it all. So thank you for everyone for being here tonight. Marty or Andrea or any of our Build Shift community members want to have anything else before we close? Anything else to share? All right, I'll just say thanks again. Looking forward to working with you. I really hope by the end of these working groups, we're actually in person and we get to know each other and the way we used to, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks, Vin. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks all.
Bye. Thank you.